surf rescue boats were paddled out into the surf through the most incredible conditions. Surfing these heavy, huge boats into shore is an extraordinary feeling. When we return, we paddle a New South Wales classic and review the Sydney Olympic slalom site. Steve Muir is a custom kayak maker, a downriver champion, and a keen whitewater kayaker. Steve lives about a half hour from the coast. We asked Steve about Australian whitewater and the influence that surf has on Australian river paddling.
What parts of Australia are good for whitewater?
All down the east coast of Australia, starting in Cairns, northern New South Wales, good. Victoria in the alpine regions, and in Tasmania, so you get a lot of rainfall in Tasmania.
Would the paddling be different in those different regions?
Yeah, the alpine regions, it's snow melt, so you go down there end of winter, and it's quite steep creeking type stuff. Around this area, we have like a good solid granite base in the rivers, and the water is built up before the rapids, so they're pool, drop, pool, drop. Further up north in the Queensland regions, where they've got a lot of tropical rainfall, the rivers are more constant rapids, one on top of the other.
Right. Besides whitewater, there's a lot of surf in Australia too. Does that have an influence on whitewater paddling here?
Yeah, a lot of the guys would have a wave ski, or they'd choose a kayak, which they can use for both river running, play holing, and in the surf.
Right, so they'd surf on the ocean in their same boat then?
Yeah, super sport's really popular because the flat back deck, you can blast in on the wave.
Right. Would any of the equipment be would carry over as well?
Yeah, most guys that own the rash shirt wearing under your wetsuit. People just wear them and stop getting sunburnt.
Right.
Surfboard wax up the coamings on your boats, make the spray stay on. It's just like a beeswax. They rub it on the deck of the surfboards. It makes the water shed off and gives you grip for your feet.
Oh, right.
So by putting it on your spray decks or on your paddle shafts, it gives you grip.
Steve and some competitors from the slalom race met up with us to head down the Upper Nymboida River. It was a great day on a narrow river that had just enough water to keep things interesting.
It hadn't rained for a few days before we got to the Upper Nymboida, so the river was running pretty low. That meant a lot of the rocks, which would have normally been covered over, were now exposed, creating more obstacles and making it pretty tricky to negotiate our way down through. Paddling technical waterfalls like this is a lot like running a slalom course. You need to put the boat on the line you want to go, make the right move at the right time. The big difference, though, is that when you're in a race, if you make a mistake, you're going to get assigned a penalty from a gate judge. Out here, the penalties are going to be assigned by the rocks, and they're going to hurt a lot more.
We had a really good day, great paddling people, and the river was an ideal mix of fun play spots and technical rapids. We could have stayed longer, but we had scheduled a meeting at SOCOG, the Sydney Organizing Committee of the Olympic Games. We were to be in Sydney to meet with John Felton, head of whitewater slalom for the 2000 Olympic Games. John had promised us a look at the plans for the Olympic whitewater course.
If you have a look at the overlay here, what we've got is existing facilities. That being this area here, being the existing sprint and rowing facility. It's been open for about 18 months now. That area here is fed from a warm-up lake, which allows athletes to warm up prior to coming over to the sprint course. If you come across here to this side of the warm-up lake, this is where the site for the slalom will be. So the stadium will actually take up an area here about 150 metres by 100 metres by 150 metres. So from here we've got a low intake pond. The water actually is pumped from there up through 6 pumps. They're a submersible pump up 6 metres to the top pond and starts and runs down from the top weir down.
The man-made course will have a definite stadium feel to it, complete with seating around the outside of the oval. It's a concrete river, circular so that the athletes will have the option of staying in their boats at the finish and being lifted by conveyor belt to the start to run the course again.
The opportunity exists here with the flexibility of the course that we do have, that we can change the obstacles and therefore change the characteristics of the course. That allows us to run different competitions for different levels of competitor at different flows, but also at different course configurations. So there's definitely can be run a very safe and easy mode for school children, or it can be built up to the highest level of international competition, being, in this instance, the Olympic Games.
The course will be ready in the summer of 1999. Coming up next, we head north to Queensland and hit the creeks. We wanted to paddle some different Australian rivers, so we headed to Cairns in Queensland and based ourselves in the north for a few days. This is a land of creeks, rivers, waterfalls and rainforest. Perhaps the best-known whitewater river in Australia, the Tully, is here. Our plan was to meet up with local paddler Brad Everson and paddle a few rivers, including the Tully. Our first stop, the Barron. We're in luck. There's enough water to paddle the river even this late in the day. The creeks and rivers here are rain dependent and levels are tricky. You need enough water to run the river, but too much water can be dangerous, and too much rain can wash out access roads.
The Barron River is really brown because the river's carrying a lot of sediment down through it. In the headwaters of the river, it must go through some really sandy areas, and it erodes that soil down and carries it with it as the river heads down to the sea. The brown water makes it a little trickier to paddle in. As a kayaker, you're looking for the different types of waves and formations that the whitewater, and those are sort of your keys to figure out which way you want to go down the river. The brown tinge to the water makes it a lot harder to read those formations. After a while, you get used to it, but the first few days when you're paddling in it, it throws you off a little. A lot of the kayakers here work as safety kayakers for raft trips or as raft guides, so they come from a real whitewater background and they're very comfortable paddling in this river. Basically, they're spending their day off at the office, and you can tell how familiar they are in this environment.
After the Barron River, we decided it was time to head on to the Tully. The Tully River is commercially rafted as well as being kayaked by hundreds of paddlers. It's a dam-controlled river, and since it is commercially run in rafts 12 months a year, you're pretty well always guaranteed water for kayaking. Lucky for us, we met up with Oliver Phipps, the gold medalist in slalom kayak at the Atlanta Olympics in 1996. Oliver hadn't paddled much since winning the gold medal and World Cup in men's kayak, but he was keen to join us on the Tully. He's an inspirational paddler, incredibly smooth and controlled.
At first I was a bit intimidated about paddling with Oliver, just going out for a fun day on the river, but as soon as we put on, he was just a blast to be with. I mean, here's a guy that was undoubtedly the best competitive kayaker in the world a couple years ago, and he's all smiles as soon as we get on the river, and he's having a great time. It's a great sunny day, and just like so many people we meet on the rivers, he gets so much joy out of paddling, and he's just so much fun to be around. The Tully River flows right after the dam, so the water coming out there is really clear, which makes it great for paddling. It's got quite a bit of water flowing down a narrow section of river with some big house-sized boulders, which makes the paddling really interesting. You have to think quick and make some pretty tight turns through the rapids. and it's non-stop. There's pool drop rapids, but they come one after another, fast and furious. It's a non-stop paddling roller coaster ride. Besides the adventure of challenging yourself and paddling down the Tully, it's also just a beautiful part of the world to be in.
From the very popular Tully River, we went next to the Russell River, a tiny creek with a good stretch of whitewater. It was a 45-minute walk in through dense rainforest and a comfortable creek paddle out.
Many rivers that are whitewater kayaked on, you're able to drive to the start and the finish points of the river, so it's really easy to get around. At the Russell River, we were only able to drive into the bottom, and then we had to put our kayaks on our shoulders and walk all the way up to the top of the river and then kayak our way back down. The benefit of the remoteness on the Russell is that you're really just out there with you and the people that are going paddling with you for the day. The downside of that is if you do happen to get into any trouble, you really have to rely on just each other to get yourselves out of the trouble and down the river safely. In this part of Queensland, the average temperature was about 40 degrees Celsius or 105 Fahrenheit, and it was also quite humid because it is a rainforest type of climate. So whitewater kayaking was really a good activity for here because you're able to get into the river and cool off. I can't imagine too many other types of sports that you could do in this environment comfortably.
We really paddled a lot and paddled different stuff on this trip. We had great weather, good water levels, connected with the key people, and we're hoping for the same luck as we move on to New Zealand.